we have this tiny little lifespan. And so maybe speak to that a little bit, because I think that that can sort of be, I know for me, every time if I'm consumed with something, or there's been times in my life where there's been big things that have happened, like health problems in my family, or like things that I was very concerned about. And it was really the experience during those times where I was able to look at it from a more spiritual lens or from a larger lens. And to your point, had an experience that I can't forget. Speak to it from the spiritual standpoint of like, how do we get ourselves out of this, this fixation on this is the worst thing ever that's happening right now.
It's how do you get out of your mind? How do you go out of your mind? And Alan Watts once put it very nice. He said, at least once a day, everyone should lose their mind and come to their senses. And it turned out this simple piece of advice was very profound, because if we go back to whether it's consider the lilies or smell the flowers, smell the roses, we've been told get out of our mind and come to our senses. And of course, this is an effective technique called grounding. So someone who's having a panic attack, you think of, 5 things you can see, 5 things you can hear. In other words, what the suggestion is get out of the abstract mind and come back to reality. So what is happening? And of course, the power now is a huge success because it rested on a fundamental truth that the only reality we know is what's happening right now and what we can experience. Everything else is an abstraction. The future never happens. So this future, you're so convinced that this and this will happen in the future, but the future has never happened. The only thing that's ever happened is now. The future has been a concept. And so when you bring it back to now, what's happening? Okay, yes, the mind will catastrophize that this is going to happen in the future, but what's happening now? Now you're having your tea.
Mhm.
Now you're watching the sun. You're feeling the sun on your face. That's happening. Everything else is conjecture. Everything else is a story the mind is making up. That little piece of advice, that's so powerful, and it's so much the gist of what spiritual teachers have been trying to wake us up to for thousands of years. You'll have some teachers that will, like, you're going back and forth, and people bring it back to the conceptualization of what they think will happen in the future. And they'll do something simple, they'll just let's clap their hands. And it's a really interesting effect. I've done this with students because it shares with them, like, what happened that moment? Well, the mind stopped for a second. You
Mm,
were totally alert of the now. You were in the
yeah.
present. And then you say, well, what kind of problems happen in the present? And that doesn't even work. There
Right.
are no problems in the present. Everything was fine. Everything's always fine in the
And
present.
then the mind comes in and says, who am I to feel fine? Like you talked about before.
Yeah, and I don't deserve to be fine. I should be worried about the future like everyone else. And then if the only way the mind's going to work is if it convinces that it's you. And that's the only way the mind can ever work. It's an if it can assume your identity. And of course, what one of the main messages that the spiritual teachers have told us, whether it's again Eckhart Tolle or Nisargadatta, you and Ramana Maharshi, you are not your body, you are
Yeah.
not your mind, and you are not the voice in the head.
Yeah.
Just those 3 things. You're not your body, you're not your mind, you are not the voice in the head.
So who are you?
Well, you know, I always think that's everyone's adventure.
Uh-huh.
That's your own adventure. But of course, the spiritual teachers have always said you're the observer. And that can also hide itself as another thought. But there is a little bit of a good pointer to it. The consciousness. And again, what does that mean? Well, people know what it means. And you know exactly what it means to be lost in thought and versus to be in the conscious moment. For me, one of the most significant conscious moments was, fixing a flat on my bike. I was riding my bike and I had, and this is in the middle of my neurosis. I was like completely neurotic. And I fixed the flat tire and all of a sudden I had this amazing epiphany. I'm like, where was it? What was I doing for the last 15? Oh, I was in reality.
Mhm.
I wasn't thinking
In the
anymore.
present moment.
I was
You
totally in the present moment. And I
Yeah.
and I thought, wow, that was wonderful. How can I make that happen again?
It's meditative state, right? You were
It's
in
meditation.
meditation while you were fixing a tire. Yeah.
That's all meditation. Meditation is anytime you are in reality without thinking. Or thinking may be taking place, but you're not identifying with it. So people struggle because they say, everything has been such a mess and maybe I should start to meditate. But they meditate with a lot of thinking. But the thinking is okay as long as it's not you. And so, it's the mind can be a very fascinating, if not absolutely hilarious thing to watch.